I thought today we might have a different perspective about Thanksgiving. And today we're honored to welcome a truly powerful voice in the Indigenous storytelling and cultural preservation. Jessica Engelking, a descendant of the White Earth Band of Ojibwe, Jessica's work shines a light on truth, history, and the wisdom passed down through generations. As an author, educator, and advocate for Indigenous sovereignty, she helps reframe narratives that too often have been overlooked, misunderstood, and erased. In this special Truthgiving episode, we explore the deeper meaning behind the season, not as a traditional holiday, but as a moment of truth, reflection, and healing. Jessica will guide us into Ojibwe perspectives on gratitude, honesty, and remembrance, and share how Indigenous communities are reclaiming their own stories. We'll also talk about the Ojibwe prophecy, the ancestral teachings, warnings, and vision that continue to shape identity, responsibility, and a path forward for future generations. We'll get ready for an enlightening conversation that bridges the past and the present, challenges old narratives, and invites us all to a deeper understanding. I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. Please welcome to the Truth Be Told studios for the first time, Jessica Engelking. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, everyone.
Well, Jessica, first of all, thank you for being here. I always love having someone that's Indigenous to America, North America, and it's an honor to have you here and to hear your perspective on Truthgiving. So if you're ready to get started, I am.
Let's do this.
For those people that really are unfamiliar with Ojibwe or any of the Native American tribes that you represent or that you want to describe the identity or cultural worldview of the Native American people, because I think a lot of people, which is still mind-blowing when you hear Native American, especially from the past, you always think of them as savages or, brutal and killers, and which now we know is not true, but there's still people out there that have that perspective.
Thank you. And I'm glad you're creating space to clear up those misconceptions,
Right.
Indigenous people, we may have engaged in skirmishes of, territory, we weren't genociding each other,
right,
by any means. And so my organization, Great Plains Action Society, we're not an Ojibwe organization. We're made up of people from many nations. Our executive director is Cree. We have,
nice.
Being in this area, some Dakota and Ho-Chunk people. But I do think that without, we don't want to be pan-Indigenous, we don't want to be like, all Native people believe this, but there is a shared sense of duty to land protection. So of our initiatives at Great Plains, we started as an environmental organization, and land defense is a huge part of our work still. And then being a good relative, taking care of each other, and not just, within the tribe, but, within our neighborhoods, our communities.
And so, even though you're a descendant of the Ojibwe, what tribe that you would associate with the most, personally?
I'm only White Earth Ojibwe, so.
Oh, okay.
My grandmother was essentially, entirely Ojibwe.
Wow.
My mom's half, so.
That's pretty. To me, awesome to feel that history, that culture that is running through your veins, that I think a lot of people to this day, we hear about the powwows, and I go to many of them out here, and I just enjoy watching many of these traditional dances and seeing the dress and stuff. But to actually have that into your DNA just must make you feel really proud of where you come from.
Yes, I mean, I certainly have a lot of honor and respect for my ancestors, but with that, don't want to romanticize it too much, comes a lot of, genetic trauma.
Of course.
A lot of, violence against us in this nation's history. So there's, a lot of hardship, but also resilience. And I think, a lot of, what's happening now is recognizing and appreciating the resilience that we inherited, not just, the bad stuff.
Right. Well, how do you do that? How do you separate the two to appreciate the heritage and the culture? Because there's a huge history and community and even a responsibility on your generation and younger to continue this versus the trauma that was placed on not just one tribe, but every tribal people in America, in Canada. I mean, there's so many different land masses that they were not treated well. How do you separate those two of creating a safe place for your culture to continue versus keeping the trauma away so you don't keep passing it on to your next generations? Because that must be hard.
Yeah, and the thing is, you don't separate the two. You approach everything as a whole, and I think that's where a lot of just humans in general suffer, is that trauma is pushed away or buried, and then when that happens, it's not addressed, and so really confronting it head on is key to working through it and ensuring that generations to follow have it better than we do.
Yeah, and I think majority of anybody who you always want to try to pass a better life or better culture to your next generations. But the Native American people definitely, I think, want to continue the culture itself. Many non-Native people learn about Ojibwe and even other tribes through textbooks and stereotypes. What are some important misconceptions you would like to correct that you still see today?
Yeah, that's a huge issue. In fact, my title with our organization is Representation Director. And so my work primarily focuses on addressing these misconceptions. The history books were not written by us. They were written about us in a way that promotes a narrative that is far from reality. One thing, it's funny, one thing that I often find myself having to do, at the beginning of these talks is just remind people that we still exist. An alarming number of people think that natives just don't exist anymore, that we went extinct with the dinosaurs or something. But no, we're still here and thriving and living, beautiful, full contemporary lives. And so, showing that is a big part of, seeing is believing. Right. And so showing, what we're up to today and, that we're still here is a large part of what we try to do with Great Plains. And then, promoting a true and accurate history of the United States goes a long way in, promoting or of addressing, the stereotypes that have been pushed and handed down throughout the years. So, understanding the context in which, this nation was born and expanded and has continued to grow, puts into perspective, how it is that, Indigenous people are seen. I mean, I know there's a lot of stereotypes that we're all drunks or something, but I encourage people to look into the history of whiskey rations. We were, just given whiskey, locked up on reservations, starved and given whiskey. the history of abuse and, sexual abuse, especially in the boarding schools, that will make people want to numb themselves.
Yeah.
And so, if you see, a drunk native on the street, have some compassion, because they probably were, had horrible things happen to them as a child.
Yeah. And I living in Los Angeles area, we see a lot of homeless people, and, a lot of people look very negative towards them. And there's I'm sure a lot of Native Americans that are on the street, and yeah, there are some people that choose to be there. That's just because they don't want to live a certain way, which is fine, whatever they want. But there are a lot of people, it's trauma from families, from society, that have been, very harsh towards them. And it's hard to not seek alcohol or drugs or something that will numb their pain. What do you see, especially in the Native tribes, and that are the main reason the people nowadays could be leaning towards drugs or alcohol?
Well, yeah, I just want to acknowledge that homeless populations do tend to skew heavily Native, and also heavily veteran, and also veterans tend to skew heavily Native too. We have like the highest percentage of armed service enrollment of the demographics. But it's not just Indigenous people that are homeless.
Oh no, and it's everyone.
That is something that we try to talk to people about, is understanding how these epidemics that are harming people are themselves a product of colonial violence. So
yeah,
a lot of times things get framed in the these are our fights, and that we're the only ones that are being harmed by ongoing colonial violence. And that's just not true. Like, if you're listening to this, your life is worse off because of colonial violence. And so getting people to, kind of understand that, it's not just hurting us. Right. It's hurting everyone.
I agree.
But yeah, a lot of the turning to drugs and alcohol is a, factor of poverty. Many reservations just don't have resources, and with that comes a sense of hopelessness, a feeling of shame or devaluation. So when we talk about these stereotypes, like when you're on the receiving end of them, especially with children, it's really hard not to internalize themselves. So, trying to keep the drugs and alcohol off the reservation while, empowering the youth is important to combating these issues. But again, understanding like the history of, substance abuse and, white violence, think about like when we shipped crack cocaine to the Black communities, like these things have always been used to weaken those considered undesirable. And so, knowing the history there, I think puts things kind of into perspective. We weren't, drunks before colonization. And that's, largely, again, like alcohol was used to trick us into signing treaties, which were then broken anyway. But, understanding that context, I think, can help see the bigger picture.
I don't know if you've heard of Ernie LaPont, the great-grandson of Sitting Bull. I've interviewed him, and I had a festival about 2 years ago already, and he came out and spoke at it, and I really appreciated him being very open about what you're saying, and also holding on to his great-grandfather's legacy, and because when Sitting Bull was here, like you said, he fought back as much as he could, but in the long term, we know what happened, but he still is really held on to his spirituality. How has that spirituality helped you and Native people? I hate to even say survive, but it kind of is a survival skill, is holding on to that spirituality. How has that helped you personally?
I mean, personally, the ancestral connection to the land, carries with it, a very profound sense of duty and responsibility. Right. And, the Ojibwe and many others included, think of what we do now in terms of how it will affect 7 generations after us. So, when we make decisions, not just asking, what benefits us today, but what's going to be best for our future relatives. And doing the work we do, I feel like really is, to the best of our ability, acting, for the generations to come.
Now, those generations to come, as we know, even like me, I grew up in a very small town in Kansas. Many of my friends stayed in my very small hometown, but I moved on. I went on to a bigger city, went to California. How do you see, because you're very involved, but how are you seeing the younger people, the younger generations? Are they holding on to this, to the legacies and the culture, or are you seeing it slowly being lost?
Well, there's a lot of reclaiming going around.
Oh, wonderful.
In a beautiful way.
I love it.
It's important to remember that, practicing our religions was illegal until not that long ago.
Isn't that crazy? I just think that's the craziest thing.
Yeah. And so, we couldn't do the things that we needed to be doing. Probably, we're on the down low, but, having that concerted effort by the government to take our languages, now we have, much more opportunities to get those languages back. So I think there's a lot of reclaiming what was stolen.
Yeah, it is so hard to even believe how the government of the United States, and at the time was I'm sorry, I'm white, pure white, but how it was pretty much all white Caucasian people that did and Christian white people that did this to the Native Americans. And it really is hard for me to reconcile with that, to really understand why that was happened. Because before we went on air, you talked about the boarding schools, and you said it was okay that we could talk about that because you said you were even part of it, but your grandmother definitely was part of that culture where they were pretty much beaten to forget their language, forget their religion, or not that, but spirituality, their culture. Talking to your grandmother, how was that? I hope you don't mind sharing that for people that don't understand. It might make a difference to saying this was definitely wrong.
She didn't talk about it.
Oh, she didn't at all?
No, I mean, and that's not uncommon. I mean, if you think about like your own families, for those listening, like if you had relatives who went to war,
they don't want to talk about
the traumas that they experience, they just don't talk about it. So if you have uncles or grandfathers, who served in Vietnam, like they're not going to want to
it's true.
sit down and tell you the stories sometimes because a lot of survival for them was, shutting that out.
Yeah.
So I never went to the boarding school systems, but there were still systems active within my lifetime. I think up until like the mid to late 90s in Canada, there were still boarding school systems. So
that is unbelievable. It really is in the 90s.
And one thing that's happening now, a big thing, is the taking the bodies back. So around these schools, they're using the ground penetrating sonar radar to find the bodies of the children lost there. And so I think with those children coming home, it's incredibly difficult, but also like an opportunity for healing, to have them back. And so, I mean, yeah, I think, it's not the America you're taught in school, but,
not at all.
The America that existed stripped babies from their homes, and oftentimes they were killed. There's, a lot of any kind of abusive violence you can think of happened. But so now we're going around to these sites, and well, I'm not personally, but the finding the mass graves.
Yeah.
And that's heartbreaking, but it's good that these babies are coming home.
I feel like I've always felt this way. Like I had a kinship towards Native Americans or just Native people, Indigenous people. I don't know. I don't. Maybe in a past life I was part of a Native tribe somewhere. I don't know. I just because the music, the culture, the way nature. Because I'm a huge nature person. That's my meditation. That's where I find peace, is through nature. Hug a tree, talk to animals. I don't know what it is. That's just where I feel more at home versus being around people. So I've always had that from a early childhood, even in Kansas. In fact, where I'm from, there's a lot of places where Native tribes were. In fact, I think in Arkansas City, Kansas, they found pretty much a city, because most of what we've learned that you were just like few hundred natives in teepees, and that was about it. Well, no, they said this had 20,000 people in this location, and it's hard to believe that we never heard that. We never heard that there was a civilization before we even got here where they had a government. They had so many different things that we actually took a lot from when we wrote the Constitution, and many of the things that we used in America history, we took from a lot of Native tribes, which, how does that feel knowing that, I mean, I can already say how you feel, but that before we got here, you guys thrived. You really did. There was how many hundreds of millions of bison that we pretty much destroyed. And people that will listen to this thing, they're like, no, you didn't. No, we wiped out Native Americans. We wiped out the bison. We just pretty much raped the country of its resources, and we're still doing it, but just in different ways. But how does that make you feel? Does it just make you angry as hell to feel that what happened and what could have been if we did not and just work together?
Yeah, I mean, I hope everyone, regardless of Native or not, thinks about, what, not only what could have been, but what could be now.
Right.
But yeah, like with Truthgiving, a lot of what we do is, try to really push for, an accurate understanding of the history of this continent. And yeah, there were cities. So, that's not what you learn. The narrative we're fed is kind of like, oh, this was just open space, and there was like, smatterings of savages, right. And, they all lived in teepees, and, right. But, we had immense cities, with aqueducts, like European architecture architects were just, blown away, well, we're here, like, having big, beautiful, clean cities, they were dumping shit on each other, in the streets. So, like, this is not what you picture, even like, if you're driving across country, the interstates, follow trade routes that existed for, thousands of years. Yeah. There was commerce, there was, art, there was culture, there was so much, there was agriculture. So I know a lot of, the idea of Indigenous people were that we weren't using the land, and that's just entirely untrue. We just, did, permaculture in a way that honestly best, made use of the soil. Living in Iowa, a lot of people like on the coast don't really think of Iowa much, but really we're ground zero for like big ag, environmental destruction. Iowa's the most biologically altered place.
Is it really?
In the country, yeah. It used to have, the biodiversity of a rainforest, and now it has the biodiversity of like barely a desert. And we're also bordered by, the two largest rivers, and especially the Mississippi. Iowa's a #1 contributor to the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. So, what farming looks like now is rooting the soil. I mean, we used to have beautiful, prairie with roots extending, beat down, like holding the soil in place. And, these crop rotations of corn and soybean don't do much, for the soil. And then they spray them with shit, and then all that shit runs off into the water. And that all goes down into the Gulf of Mexico, and then you get these algae blooms. And what's happening to the land is some very real colonial violence that we're working to address. But that just doesn't harm Native people. That's harming all of us. Iowa's got like the second fastest rising cancer rate or something, or so much cancer, and they want to blame that on drinking because that makes it a personal responsibility thing. But it's all the carcinogens we're exposed to. Yeah, no, like the water is not drinkable here.
Is it to Iowa, that bad?
Filter,
Wow. Yeah, I even where I'm from, they had to switch it because of there was too much algae in the water. They had to switch it to a different location to get water from. So, I mean, algae. That definitely is from runoff from oil and pesticides that they sprayed the crops in the fields. I didn't know that about Iowa. That's sad to hear. Wow. I want to talk about truth-giving because we touched on it just for a second. You've spoken about it and as a path towards honesty and healing, because I think sometimes the truth, like truth be told, truth-giving, it can set you free. It can open up healing process. And how does this concept reshape how we understand Thanksgiving from your point of view, Indigenous perspective?
Yeah, so we just recently held our 9th annual Truthgiving event. It's one of my favorite things that we do as an organization. It originally started as an effort to combat the false narrative of, the Thanksgiving myth. Right. This idea that, everyone came together and we're friends and it was all good after that. And, if you look at the history of it, understanding that it came in the immediate aftermath of massive population devastation due to illnesses, smallpox being a lot of it. So like we didn't, we love our animal relatives, but we weren't living with livestock the way that the settlers were. And so there was a lot of immunity there to diseases that we just did not have. And so, when people were showing up, we just lost large chunks of population to illness. And that kind of gets talked about sometimes in history more, I think, as a way to be like, oh, we didn't try to, we've got diseases, oops,
Right.
Nature. That was later weaponized. Smallpox blankets were handed out. There was, what may not have been intentional did, become biological warfare. But, at that first Thanksgiving, some of the natives there, not that long after, found their heads on spikes. And so it wasn't the cute, peaceful little welcome story that we wanted to be. And so we kind of started out trying to just, counter that narrative. But, you can't just keep doing that year after year after year. People are going to be like, okay, we heard this last year. And so it's really, as an event, grown and become, something beautiful where we have the opportunity to share culture. We often have dancers or drummers or speakers. And we try to really talk about what's going on, in the world in terms of colonial violence now and what we should be paying attention to. So over the years, a lot we've been talking about with our Palestinian relatives and giving them space to talk about, the colonial violence colonial genocides, that they're experiencing right now. And this year we had members from the Free Fridge program in Iowa City. So, community fridges where you can leave something, take something as you need it.
Because, that's nice.
Right now, keeping our relatives fed, right. that should really be the heart of Thanksgiving. But it's very necessary in the climate right now, especially, to make sure people are able to feed themselves. So we had them come and talk, and we had a representative from the trans community who spoke to, the issues they're facing and violence against, our trans relatives is also a form of colonial violence. I mean, within many tribes, what we would now consider LGBTQ plus people, they weren't shunned, they weren't ostracized, they weren't harmed, they weren't legislated against. They were valued for their unique contributions, and in many cases considered, sacred. And that, having a different way of being in the world.
Yeah.
So these gender, not just sexuality, but gender norms that, we're seemingly forced to live under in American society. Those themselves are, that's some colonial violence,
It just, that to me, that's what God, universe, whoever you worship or whoever you look to, that's the way I feel like this earth was supposed to be. Taking care of Mother Earth, taking care of each other, acceptance, feeding the hungry, feeding the poor, not taking excess. Like I said, it's nice to have a nice home. It's nice to buy your cars. But how much does one need how much does one need to destroy Mother Nature? I remember back in the 80s, when even maybe late 70s, early 80s, when the margarine, and butter it's not nice to fool with Mother Nature. I feel like that's what we do constantly. We fool with Mother Nature. We fool with other religions and other people's thoughts and beliefs. And I just feel like eventually, if you believe in karma, it will come back and bite you. So I just feel like maybe we should start taking some wisdom from our native people and indigenous people, because you really had and have a lot of the answers to how to treat the world and how to treat each other. So,
so for a lot of tribes, the measure of a person, the esteem that they're held in was, a product of what they gave, so it wasn't about having the most, it was about providing the most and giving the most and sharing the most with your community. Right. And so it's really, the exact opposite of, this wealth worship and wealth hoarding that's happening now. And even Christianity in this country has become incredibly warped. Christian nationalism really bears no resemblance to the actual teachings of Christ in the Bible.
Yeah.
And so, at some point they made up the prosperity gospel to kind of, how do we account for, the fact that we want to hoard on to and amass all this wealth with the fact that Jesus is saying, it's more difficult for a rich man to get into heaven than for a camel to pass through an eye of a needle. And so this is oh, well, God wants you to be rich. And it's that's not it. I don't think people fully, it's hard. Big numbers are really hard, but fathoming what hundreds of billions of dollars, trillions now, looks like, it's it's hard for the brain to do that.
Used to be a billion. Now a billion, it's a lot, but it used to be when I was a million was a lot. Now a million, you're okay, it's nice. But a billion, but now somebody that might be a trillionaire,
yeah,
that is just unfathomable.
It's truly disgusting. It really is.
Yeah. I want to talk about how Native, especially the people that you're around, connect to the land. How does this loss of protection of land and influence affect not only us personally, but as humanity?
I mean, Indigenous stewardship of land is so important, for the world. If we look at, where biodiversity exists on this planet, it's in places of Indigenous stewardship. In this country, land has become commodified. It's something you buy. And so, when you've historically been kind of kept out of that, wealth accruing system, it's hard to get land. I will say one thing that as an organization we're really excited about is after, a decade or so of saving, we're finally able to purchase some land in Iowa City to create the spaces, to do the work that, we've been doing, to provide community, to provide healing, to grow gardens, for the community.
That's great.
Get some solar going, all the good things. But yeah, I do encourage everyone, listening to spend time in nature. One, it's really good for your health, just being out there, do some green bathing, lower the cortisol. It's good for you, but it also makes you appreciate what we stand to lose.
I can attest to that. I like I told you earlier, nature is where I heal, and nature is where I talk to God or universe, whatever you want to say. I just feel my connection there. I love it. And now that I moved a little bit further out from the city, and I live close to Big Bear Mountain, so I go to the waterfalls, I go up into nature, and I just walk, listen to nature sounds, and it just, I'm like, if I go to right now, I'm happy because that's the way it feels to me. And personally, or even tribally, how can you share for people on how to healing practices? And you just said go to nature, but personally and as community, they can play a role in restoring balance that prophecy often points towards. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So, in the questions you sent me, you did ask about like the Seven Fires prophecy and whatever.
Right.
It actually kind of has been something I've been thinking about, just especially in this past year. And this is just me speaking, personally as an individual, but I did kind of reach a point where I feel like it's too late. Kind of with the prophecy, there's always this like, choose, like where it's something that can still be, there's a chance to, get on the right path and do things in a good way. But, if you look at the science,
it's not good.
There are a lot of depressed climate scientists, ecologists, anyone dealing with the natural world, just realizing that, a lot of last chances are gone. Yeah. And there's a lot of just, it's too late for a lot of things. But that just means that the work we do to build community is even that much more important, because, where we might not be able to stop, the environmental destruction that we've set in motion, we can work to, protect our communities and keep each other safe.
Yeah.
And so for people, get to know your neighbors, because those are the people, when shit goes down, they're the people closest to you. And so build relationships, if you got someone who needs help them, if you have skills, share your skills, teach your skills. If you grow a garden, share your food, teach your neighbors how to grow some food. Be in community, because especially when you have that connection, that's why churches are so popular in a lot of ways. Is not just, the beliefs, but the coming together and that feeling you get when you come together. If church isn't your thing, go to a concert, and you have that moment in the, where you're like in the pit or whatever, and you feel it and you feel, like
the vibration,
you're like kind of moving as one and you're a part of something, bigger than yourself, experience that. You hear a lot of like joy being a form of resistance. It is, and that's important. Don't let it be your only form of resistance. It can't be the only thing, but it's necessary. And so, on a personal level, experience moments of joy each day, take pause, if you see something and just wonder in it. Drink as much water as you can. If it's Iowa, filter it.
Right.
Take care of yourself and take care of each other. That's really kind of what it comes down to.
I always say when the people that think that the climate change doesn't exist, but if there was I just watched Deep Impact, the movie, where a comet was heading towards the Earth. If you denied it, and we know that comets and asteroids have hit the Earth many times since the beginning of this Earth itself. If we know 2 years in advance, 5 years in advance, that it's going to be a direct hit, we're going to do everything possible to build something, a rocket, missiles, somebody to go up and try to deflect it, to blow it up. Well, there is a climate comet heading towards us that we need to do something about. Believe it or not, something's changed. Something's changing. I know it's people like, well, it's snowing, so it's not global warming. Well,
did you ever watch Don't Look Up?
Yes, I did. That's a great.
As you're talking about that,
yes.
That's what I was thinking about, and that's kind of what it's going to be. And like the climate comet kind of has already hit. It's here, and the ultra wealthy are always going to have their bunkers and their ways of self-preservation, and for those of us who don't, what it's going to take is communities coming together to figure out how to keep each other. They're not going to keep us safe. We need to keep us safe.
Yeah. I hate to say it this way, but I'll be 56 in 2 weeks.
Happy almost birthday.
Thank you. I don't know if the overall effect is going to affect me personally. It probably will start to beginning, at least in my time on this earth. But my great nieces and nephews, their children are definitely going to be the ones that not benefit, but have to deal with the issues that we keep causing. And I remember this when I was a personal trainer years ago. He was in his 70s, and I said, about the future of our planet. He goes, "Am I going to be alive?" I said, "Probably not." He said, "Well, then I don't care." I'm like, that's the mindset I think of a lot of people. They don't.
That's the opposite of the 7 generations thinking.
Right. And I just think we need to think about the people to follow us, because I want a better world.
It's changing now. Like, you grew up in Kansas. Like, do you remember when winter started?
Oh, yeah. No, in the 70s, we used to get snow all the time. Now it's cold and icy. Hardly ever snows.
And the summers are getting rough, too. I was reading something about, like, summer sad, like the seasonal affective. But, like,
yeah,
like all the smoke from the fires. Well, the fires themselves are deadly. But, like, I spent a lot of time not being able to go outside because of, like, breathing issues. And that's, like, coming down from Canada.
Yeah.
And, yeah, it's not the same. Every winter I have the sad little twinge of like, is this the last snow?
Right. It's, and like I said, you can't deny there is a change. I don't care what you believe, there has been a change. I can't believe that our time is flying by and we're almost out of time, but what does it mean to you personally to carry on your ancestors' stories, their teachings, even their prophecies, in today's world? How do you feel about that? How do you try to preserve that, not only in your world, but try to extend it out to others outside of your tribe and your area that you live?
I feel incredibly lucky to be in the position that I am. Rates of Native high school graduation are not great. The number of Natives with bachelor's degrees isn't, that high. And,
wow.
I was fortunate enough to be able to go to graduate school, get my master's.
That's great.
And then, to meet, similar minded, friends and cohorts, and to find a position working where I can do stuff like, talk about representation with people, for a living. And, there's so much luck involved in that. Like, I'm very lucky that, I had parents who worked really hard to, break away from a lot of the generational violence. I'm lucky that, I had the educational opportunities that I did. And so, a part of that luck comes like, well, now I need to pay it forward and do what I can to make others' lives better, in the ways that I had these opportunities. Sometimes it feels heavy, and it's hard too, because even when you get into these positions, there's always some kind of level of almost survivor's guilt.
Right.
Where it's like, why was I able to make it here? Not that special, but I think creator things worked out for me in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I think there's a profundity there that, I feel, lucky to even have the chance to try to do these things.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I appreciate what you do, and even what I do in my podcast. Like I said, I've talked to pretty much everybody you can think of, with conspiracy to UFOs to all kinds of different parts of the paranormal world. But also, I've being in the background, or not background, being in the forefront, talking to people, you get to learn a lot of things that sometimes you wish you didn't. know. And there's a lot of things that I'm glad I do know, and things that you're sharing today, I kind of knew, but some of the stuff I did not know, and I appreciate you sharing the knowledge that you've given us. And I know a lot of people maybe want to reach out to you through Great Plains Action. Can you tell it again what Great Plains Action does and how people might want to be involved in the organization?
Yeah. Great Plains Action Society. We're an Indigenous nonprofit serving the Great Plains region, doing a variety of work to combat colonial violence. Please reach out to me. It's greatplainsaction.org. My address is on the website. And if you subscribe to our newsletter, you'll hear what's going on. Be tuned into opportunities. Before I go, as I was thinking about this, I was feeling bad because I didn't have like the most spooky or supernatural things to say. But I was going to put in a couple plugs for some positive Indigenous representation. So,
please do.
I love the show Resident Alien. It's over now. But have you watched that one?
I have not. I've seen it. I'm going to watch it, but I have not seen it.
It is a great show, and it's like the most low-key, like native coded show. I mean, they're like explicitly like Reservation Dogs or Rutherford Falls, like native shows, but Resident Alien is it's native. It just,
I love it.
People might not realize that, but there is one of my favorite parts. Within a lot of native cultures, we have stories of sky people.
Yes. I was going to say, you're going to have to come back and talk to me about that, but please share it.
Yeah. Star people. A lot of tribes have their own stories of, their interactions with star people. But I just thought it was funny because, in Resident Alien, there's an alien, near a reservations on interacting with the tribes. And it's just so funny that every time, like, a tribal member finds out that there's an alien, they're like, oh yeah, star people. Yeah. Just like totally unfazed. Where other people be like, I don't believe in aliens. What? No. They're like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Why is it sometimes though Native people don't want to share those stories? Because I remember going to the Navajo Nation and went to the museum in Arizona, and the curator for the museum told me, she goes, oh yeah, when I was a little girl at my grandma's, we used to see this saucer UFO. We could actually see little aliens inside. And I said, oh my gosh, will you come on my show? And she goes, oh, no, I don't want to. Why is it sometimes Native people don't want to share those stories?
Well, some stories are sacred, they belong to the people. Some, we don't want distorted. For some tribes, there are certain times of year where you can share certain stories and, certain stories that you only share within the tribe. Another plug I was going to put in is the new season of Welcome to Derry.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Natives tend to be like big Stephen King fans. But in there's some tribals stuff. And the most recent episode had some really interesting stuff about storytelling, which I was really excited to see. And I think it did a great job of getting at, the importance of oral storytelling, and keeping those stories, within the person. So if you write something down, it can get lost, right? But, if it's something your children grew up knowing and memorizing, it's going to stay with them. And, not to give too much away about the episode, but like, unless you have The Shining, someone can't really break into your head and steal the stories.
Right. How do you feel about, because people like me, this white boy that is really in love with the Native culture, how do you feel about that? Do you take offense when people like myself ask questions and are really interested in learning about, the culture, the history? Are you taken back by it, or are you happy to share the information?
When it's coming from a place of sincere wanting to know, of curiosity. That's great. It only becomes problematic when people come in with a romanticized notion that they want you to, kind of reaffirm. Got it. So, I mean, if you're open to hearing, all sides, things that might not align with what you, had preconceived notions about, and if you're open to hearing things that, you might not want to hear, darker histories, true histories, that's okay, So, coming into it wanting, genuine dialogue and understanding is great, coming into it wanting, some little native, mystical show. Right. That's not benefiting anyone, really.
Yeah. And no, I appreciate that. And I know there's some people that might listen to this podcast and be offended by it, but it's not about being offended. It's about really just knowing the truth of the history. Because being offended by the truth, honestly, is not doing anybody any good at all.
And it doesn't make it any less true, you know?
It's true.
And we don't want to get too down on people for not knowing the truth. Like that's not accidental. That's, it's a very purposeful, constructed narrative that, we've been fed. And, it's hard to think about, all the things that you were taught up, brought up to believe,
right,
being false.
Right.
But, instead of getting mad about that, just get more and more educated, not wanting something to be true doesn't make it not true.
Right. No matter how you can weave in and out of falsehoods or, like you said, romanticizing things, And I also think people tend to think that there's this sort of anachronistic blame, like wherein they should feel guilty for what happened before they were alive. And it's like, that's dumb. Like, nobody's holding you personally accountable. Right. But it's about knowing, like the full context of the world that you exist in right now and what you can be doing. Yeah. No, that's like saying that having an amazing mother, but having a terrible father, both are true. But you can feel shame in how they act, but it's not your responsibility to change who they are, but you can change yourself on the perspective on treating other people better. And I think, like you said, knowing the truth can sometimes put a perspective in your mind that I can do better in this world. I can give back more. I can love more. I can be less judgmental, more understanding. So we have to, you can't deny that Native people, Indigenous people were here thousands of years before we even arrived. So we need to give that respect. And I appreciate you. I respect you, and respect everything that you guys do with your organization.
Thank you. And I hope people check out our website. There's a lot of good information there. There's a lot of beautiful artwork there. We have a free art page, so people can download and print the beautiful artwork that we have. And we're on social media. We do a lot on Instagram, Facebook. Don't remember what we are on Blue Sky.
I'm not even on Blue Sky. I tried it, and I'm like, I can't do another one. So, well, Jessica, thank you so much for being here. Happy Truthgiving, and we really appreciate you. Please come back. I'm sure we have tons of more to talk about, because sky people and all kinds of different prophecies. Maybe we can dive deeper next time. So,
yeah, and I hope everyone enjoys their time with their family and friends, and just gratitude for the feasts that they're gonna partake in.
Oh, don't worry, I'm gonna eat a lot. They'll call me Fat Tony afterwards. So All right. Thank you, Jessica. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We really appreciate you. Jessica, thank you again and all that you do. And have a great Thanksgiving. I'll be here next Friday, as always. But until then, take care of yourself and each other. Bye.
Thanks for having me.